And hello, everyone, and welcome to Chuck Bushbeck Live. And we are honored and privileged to bring you the Heart of a Champion show with those individuals and groups that clearly make a difference in our lives. I am your host, Chuck Bushbeck, with my producer, Joe Lee. Bella DiSilvestro will be joining us for the next show. We have a great show for you today, though, this morning with my guest, Lou Scheinfeld, former vice president of the Philadelphia Flyers. Lou, how's it going?
It's going very well. The pandemic is kind of under control, so we're allowed to go places again. And nice to turn on a Sixers game and see 20,000 people in the stands.
What have you been up to? What have you been doing these? I know you have your own radio show, but what have you been doing in general?
Well, I wrote a book, which is taking the country by by the pinky finger, not
Right.
the storm. And it took me 6 years to write this book. I actually started it and then stopped for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, one day I got back on it and I finished it. It was published in late October. It's called Blades, Bands, like rock bands and bowlers. And it's all about the early days of the Spectrum, the Flyers, Electric Factory, the Sixers, how we got started, ran out of money, the building went into receivership, the partners split up, and somehow we turned it into a success. Here's a copy of the book.
And
Blades,
Ed Snyder on the
bands,
cover with you,
and
owner of the
that's
Flyers.
that's actually an actual book, a real book.
It's a
Yeah,
real
so
book, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
So I'm very excited about it. I want. It's not a sports book. It's not a hockey book. It's a story about two guys by the name of Jerry Woolman and Ed Snyder who put their heads and money together and started a hockey team in a non-hockey town and built an arena that the city said that wasn't needed because we had one at 46th and Market, an old decrepit building. So it's a time that no longer exists where an average Joe can get into the business. Now it's all big corporations.
Well, before we get into those, I've heard numerous stories from it, but before we get into it, let's talk about Lou Scheinfeld for a second. When we build a champion, whether it be a sports team, maybe an individual has achieved a certain level of success, can you take us back to your childhood and maybe what was that like for you growing up? Where was it? And what were some of the influences that were on your life at that time?
Well, I had the greatest life any kid could have. I grew up in a candy store.
Nice.
We had Breyer's ice cream and milkshakes and newspapers, comic books that were 10 cents that are selling for $20,000 a piece now. That if I saved 10 of them, I could be a multimillionaire. And we had, it was just wonderful to grow up there because my parents, we lived over the store, 30th and Girard, 4 blocks east of the zoo, called North Central Philadelphia, North Philly. And it was just wonderful. We had no car. We would walk into Center City or take the trolley. The only phones we had were two pay phones in the store, the kind where you go in and close the door and
Yeah.
sit there and make your calls. And it was a simple life. It was we were one of maybe two or three Jewish families in the entire neighborhood, but it was a wonderful neighborhood. A lot of German, a lot of Irish, hardworking blue collar neighborhood. And our door was always open. The candy store was open from 6:30 in the morning till 11:30 at night. And
Hmm.
my parents felt that they could never close because they didn't want to let the people down who might want to come in for Kodak film or an aspirin or a milkshake or a newspaper, a pack of cigarettes, sewing and needles and thread.
Right.
It was the hub of the neighborhood, and I was right in the middle of it.
When with that experience, and you obviously got some business experience from that, you took a career in journalism, I believe. And can you tell
I
us a little bit
did.
about that?
I did. I'm sorry. I did. I went to school in the neighborhood called John Sartain, 8 blocks away, uphill both ways, of course. And John Sartain is actually a signature on the Declaration of Independence.
Oh,
And I went from kindergarten through 8th grade and learned nothing. I swear, nothing except how to play dodgeball. And I then went to Central High, which was where the brains go in Philadelphia, all boys school at that time. And I was the poorest student in the history of the school. The very first English midterm they gave out, everybody got 190, 85, 70s, a few 60s. I got a 9. And it was the most embarrassing thing for the rest of my high school career. Scheinfeld got a 9.
Lou,
Well,
did you not study, or was this?
I didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, they said conjugate a verb. I said, I have no clue what you're talking about. Past tense, present perfect. What the hell? What is this stuff? But they took me under their wing, a couple of students, and tutored me. And in the retest, by the end of the season, they let me take it again. I got an 85. And all of a sudden, I'm not as stupid as I looked. So I graduated from Central. Actually, I got thrown out of Central for fighting and being a pest. And I wound up graduating at Standard Evening High, which is Ben Franklin High at the Broad Spring Garden.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty rough crowd. And then I went to Temple.
Okay.
Tuition was $385 a year, not
How
per
much?
semester.
How much was that?
385 for the whole year, not per semester, but the whole year, 2 semesters. And I took journalism. That was a course by itself. Now they folded it into sports marketing and English and all this stuff. But I had some wonderful professors, and I loved writing. And in our candy store, we had the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Daily News, the Bulletin,
Right.
the Record, and another newspaper I can't think of now. And the papers sold for 2 cents, and the Daily News was a penny. And edition by edition would come in all day long, starting with the Inquirer at 6:30 in the morning. And the Bulletin would come in as late as 6 o'clock at night and have baseball scores on the left bottom of the front page. It might be 5 innings of a game or 6 innings or 2 innings. And I just loved the newspapers. Of course, we had magazines and we had everything in this store. So I got into journalism.
Yeah.
I worked on the Temple News, and my first job out of Temple was with the Trentonian in New Trenton, New Jersey, writing obituaries.
Oh.
So funeral directors would call in and tell you who died, and you had to write a story about it. And I thought, well, okay, I'm in journalism. I'm in newspapers. I'm a newspaper man now. And one day, it was a kid was killed in a gang fight, and the funeral director called in the information. And the editor said to me, "Go to the house of the deceased and get a picture of him so we can run it." I said, "Sure." So I didn't know how to drive a stick shift. We didn't have a car, and they only had a stick shift station wagon. So I jumped into this old station wagon in Trenton and I put it in whatever gear I could find. And I probably destroyed that car that day because I only drove in one gear. and I went to this house and went up the steps and rang the bell, and people came out, and I asked them for a picture, and the guy punches me in the face. What are you, a ghoul? How dare you come around? Our son was killed.
Oh my God.
Picture. Yeah, it was so I thought this journalism stuff is kind of interesting.
Is that how you really felt, or you said, "Oh my God, what have I got myself into"?
Well, I was young and stupid. I didn't know, and getting $75 a week as a newspaper guy in Trenton, and the Trentonian was like the Daily News, a lively tabloid. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. I got promoted to cover City Hall, became the City Hall reporter, and then they moved me inside to be the editor. And I got fired. All of a sudden, one day they fired me. And it turns out that I was such a huge Phillies baseball fan that I would call from my desk on the phone to my wife in Philadelphia and say, "Put the game on," and put the phone in front of the speaker. And I would listen to the Phillies game while I'm doing writing stories. Well, after a month, they came to me and they said, "Why are you making all these long distance calls to Philadelphia?" And I said, "Well, I'm stupid." I told them the truth. And they took $16 out of my pay, out of my $75. And like a junkie, 6 months later, I do it again. And they fired me. They said, "That's it. We can't trust you." And they gave me 6 weeks pay. It took me 6 weeks to find my next job, which was a reporter on the Doylestown Intelligencer. covering Percy, Sellersville, and Quakertown, the big time.
Yeah,
And
big time
yeah,
is right.
I had to get up at 6 in the morning and go to each of the police stations in those three metropolises and see if anything happened overnight. And I remember Chief Hammerschmidt in Sellersville. He was asleep. He lived in the station. I had to wake him up every morning. And one day I knocked on the front door and I hear a whole lot of bustle and rustle. And all of a sudden, some woman runs out the back door carrying her clothes.
That's great.
And Chief says to me, don't put that in the paper. I said, no, absolutely. Yeah, so, but the greatest stories out of that was a bicycle was stolen, hubcaps were stolen, never a robbery or a murder. It was, but from there I wound up going to Camden, Cherry Hill Post, and then to the Daily News in Philadelphia, and that was my dream job. Covered City Hall, got to rub elbows with the mayors and governors and visiting dignitaries, and I loved it so much that they called me Front Page Lou because I kept breaking these stories, and it was a natural fit.
As we talk about people's careers and what they've achieved in your life, and you've achieved quite a bit, and we're going to talk about that. Was it the beginning of life for you when you were growing up in the store with your parents? Was it the experience of that, and then going into, was there anything else vying for your attention, or you just knew at a certain age that that's what you were going to do?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know nothing. I got to tell you, I was like a country bumpkin. The store, we were in the wrong end of town. All the kids at Central High were from nicer areas. Some had cars. They all had lawns. I had concrete up front and a trolley car.
Yeah.
And I felt inferior. I felt diminished because these kids, and not only they were rich and all, but they already knew French. They knew algebra. I didn't know what they were talking about. So. Because all we did, like I said, at John Sartain was play dodgeball for 8 years, So, but I got my confidence because I dipped ice cream, and I dipped and I dipped and I dipped ice cream, and I wound up having an extremely strong right arm. And people would challenge me to, they heard about it in the neighborhood, they would challenge me to arm wrestle, and I always won. And guys, grown men would challenge me, and if I didn't win, I would tie them. I would chew my arm up before I'd lose to anybody.
Yeah.
And I became a sensation in the neighborhood. And one day, a guy challenged me to fight in school, and I convinced him to arm wrestle, and I killed this kid. And from that day on, my confidence just blossomed. But being in a candy store with a door that's open, anybody can walk in.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody, friends, enemies, family. We didn't have a phone, like I said, other than the payphone in the store. People knew we were open, so they would just come from 6:30 to 11:30. They just drop in, and we would sit at the counter having a sundae or a milkshake and talk. And I got to meet a lot of people, but I was still pretty shy. And but having my parents, loving, wonderful parents, home in the store 24/7, it was just wonderful. And I had a fantastic childhood.
So when you're in the store, would you say that maybe the being around all those people, do you think that maybe not having everything that other kids had was influential in your life to make a decision on what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I knew I didn't want to, follow my father's career, and his father before him had a candy store at 11th and Diamond, where Temple University is, and my dad had a candy store, and my mother lived 6 doors up on Girard Avenue, and they got married, and they rented this store, and they're going to try it for a year. And 51 years later, they sold it because the neighborhood had gotten pretty bad. They had been robbed, not burglarized, robbed at gunpoint. My dad got pistol whipped by somebody. So they wound up selling the store. It's a 3-story row house for $6,000. Today, Girard Avenue, that house is $350,000, and the one across the street is $600,000. You know what, Chuck? I could have bought the block.
Yeah,
at $6,000 a piece times 20 houses. But who had 120,000?
And
I could have bought the block and had all these $300,000 and $600,000 houses. But it got me to talk to people. People would come in, they'd ask me for something,
Yeah.
and they would say, "What do you recommend?" For a headache, and I'd say, "Well, we got this, we got that. This is stronger." And I got to talk to people and overcame my shyness.
Wh- Other than you growing up and the reasons why you chose your path, was there a defining moment? And you mentioned a number of stories how you, what's the word we use, matriculated through the journalism system, if you call it that. Was there a moment that you said, "Oh, this is what I want to do"? There's no question about it. I'm not, because you've apparently ran into some difficulties. So how did you overcome those? How did you feel about that? And what was the defining moment that said, "This is what I'm doing"?
Well, I wrote about it in the book. This was my epiphany, my defining moment where I had to break out of my shell. Trenton, when I was a reporter in Trenton, they assigned me to the impaneling of a jury at the State House in the courthouse in Trenton. And I had never been in a courthouse or big buildings or stuff like this. And so I go, and there's a whole crowd of uh, court gadflies, standing blocking the door. They're just standing there talking, and I couldn't get through them. And there were cops and lawyers and hangers on, sheriffs and all, and they all knew each other. It was like a clique. And I hear the gavel inside slamming down and saying, "The court is in order. We will proceed." The first, blah, blah, and I go, "Scheinfeld, this is it." And my mother always used to say, I'll clean this up. Poop or get off the pot.
Right.
And now's your time. Poop or get off the pot. And I said, "This is it. If I don't go in there, I'm a failure. I'm a loss. I'll get fired." And I dove into the crowd like a fullback. And I'm 6 feet and 180 then, and in great shape. I'm 22 years old, and I go crashing into this crowd and push through, and I come out like a fullback breaking into the clear. And all of a sudden, I'm in the courtroom, and a guard came over and said, "Who do you represent?" I said, "The Trentonian." "Oh, press, right this way." Took me right up to the front, put me down at a table, handed me all kinds of pieces of paper with all the information of everything that was going to go on that day. Asked me if I needed water, did I want coffee. He gave me pencils and pens. I thought, hey, this, the power of the press. That was my moment of truth, my epiphany, when I got over my shyness.
Before we get into the stories of your book, was it the moment of fear that you had to make the leap or suffer the consequences? Was it the motivation? I think was your mom that said, "Poop or get off the pot"? What did you have to do to jump through that thing that you knew you were afraid of or not sure of?
It was it. Like you said, I would have suffered the consequences.
Yeah.
So it comes a time in your life when what they call flight or fight,
Yeah.
and I couldn't run away. They were paying me, to do this, and I'm
Yeah.
expected to come back with information about the impaneling of this jury for a very important trial. And I couldn't let myself down. I couldn't let them down. And I crashed into this group. I don't know that it was like bowling, like a bowling ball hitting pins, and people are like bouncing all over the place. And but I did what I had to do.
Yeah. So when you got to that courtroom and you were treated, I guess like first class, you said, "Oh, right up to the front, Mr. Scheinfeld. Yes, you're the press." I imagine that was a shot in a B-12 shot in the arm for you to move forward in your career.
Chuck, that was one of my greatest moments.
Yeah.
I
we
never
we have
played
we have a lot of
anymore.
defining moments of
Well,
you.
that one was pretty important because I literally broke through.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're gonna get into the book in 2 seconds, but we're gonna head to commercial, and we'll be right back with Lou Scheinfeld, former vice president of the Philadelphia Flyers, on Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion.
Quakertown Farmers Market, bargains are our business.
Quakertown Farmers Market and Flea Market, now even fresher with new ownership committed to the same service and value generations of shoppers have enjoyed. We strive to offer more value for your buck. Quakertown Farmers Market, open year-round, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Check out our bargains and specials on the web at itsfresherhere.com or like us on Facebook.
And we are back on Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion. My guest, Lou Scheinfeld, former vice president of the Flyers, president of the Spectrum, and a short stint with the Sixers as well, I believe, right, Lou?
President of the Sixers, yes.
We're going to get into your book now because there's so many, and I've heard many of them, but you have an eloquent, and there's the book, Blades, Bands, and Ballers, and that's Ed Snyder beside you there, the former president of the Philadelphia Flyers, owner of the Flyers. Start out with, and you jump from journalism. I don't want to go too fast because I want to get this in. What made you jump from a career in journalism to a team that wasn't even formed yet in an arena that had no history? Was this your second time in your life you said, hey, this is opening up to me and I have to jump through this now too, or go to it?
Well, by that time, I was pretty cocky and well cemented in Philadelphia politics and journalism, and I knew all the restaurant owners. It was wonderful. I was 20. What was I? 25 years old at this point, and I'm not Mr. Philadelphia, but I know every inch of town, and so I loved journalism so much, and I covered City Hall, so my job was to go to City Hall every day and work out of City Hall from 9:30 to 5:30 and send stories into the main building. And one day, the managing director, J. Ray Hunt, who was a grouchy old Damon Runyon character out of Yellow Journalism in Chicago, said he wanted me to come in and be the night editor, meaning I would work nights from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and I wouldn't be covering City Hall anymore. And I said, I don't want to do that. I love coming down here. First of all, I would sleep late, get in when I felt like it. I was doing stuff from home on the phone, and I loved hanging at City Hall. And he said, well, here's your choice. Take it or quit. So, take
great.
it or leave. So I thought about it, and I called him a day later. I said, Mr. Hunt, I have a suggestion you might be interested in. I said, I'll come inside, and I'll work 11 to 7. I said, but I also want to work at City Hall from 9:30 to 5:30. I'll do both jobs. He says, you got a deal. So I wound up working 2 full-time jobs at the Daily News, one 9:30 to 5:30, and one 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I still couldn't get enough. I loved it so much. And the remarkable thing was the second shift, because it was the union, we were union, was time and a half. So I'm making 2.5 times the salary of other people. It was amazing. And I did that for well over a year until I met Jerry Wallman and Ed Snyder. And they had, and the reason I met them was that Philadelphia Eagles, which Wallman owned and Snyder was executive vice president, got into a dispute with the mayor of Philadelphia. His name was James H.J. Tate, a real political animal. And the Eagles had a signed lease to be the only professional football team in the new stadium, which was going to be built, a Veterans Stadium. And it hadn't even been designed yet. And Jim Tate, I found out as a reporter, was dealing with Madison Square Garden and the guy by the name of Ned Irish, who was the big man at Madison Square Garden, to bring in an American Football League team and have them be co-tenants with the Eagles. And I heard that he was going to get a piece of the team if he could pull this off. So I blow up his story, and he has to back off. And Wallman calls me and says, you are incredible. You got to come work with us. I said, well, I'm not leaving journalism. This is what I do. I break stories. And they offered me several different jobs, Jerry Woolman and Ed Snyder, and none of them interested me. And one day, Snyder takes me to lunch, and he says, I got something I think is going to knock your socks off. He said, we're going to apply for a franchise in the National Hockey League. They're expanding from 6 teams to 12 next year, which would be 1967. He said, and to do that, we have to build a new arena. Would you be interested in helping put all this together? I said, well, how do you turn this down? First of all, these guys were swashbucklers, millionaires, fancy Dans with Corvettes and flying all over the country in private planes, owning the Eagles, want to start this. I thought, man, I love these guys. Yeah. And I said, if you get the franchise, I'm in. About 2 weeks later, Snyder calls me. He says, we got the franchise. Are you in? I said, I'm in. Now I got to go home and tell my wife. So fortunately, she was very sweet, very lovely lady. And she passed away recently. And she went along with it. But my friends, many of whom I wound up hiring, my friends said, are you crazy giving up a job with the Daily News and covering City Hall and being your own boss and working 2 jobs to take something? And I said, yeah, I may be crazy, but, you know, I like taking chances. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity. So I went to work.
So you went from a small candy store in North Philadelphia to the vice president of the Philadelphia Flyers. So go into a little bit how, and we've talked about this before, but go into the difficulties you had, whether it be via the Flyers being a new franchise, the Spectrum being brand new, and you as a journalist are given this job by Ed Snyder and says, "Go to it, my man." What did you run into, leading to the career that you had to overcome, and some of the issues that you struggled with?
Well, a lot of people didn't believe hockey would go over. They didn't think we needed a new arena. Jerry Woolman went bankrupt. He was building what would have been the tallest skyscraper in North America, the Hancock Center in Chicago. He ran into severe construction problems. John Hancock, a very conservative insurance company from Boston, was underwriting it. They pulled out their financing, and Jerry was left to hang out and dry. The building was already up to like 10 or 15 stories, and it was sinking. You couldn't see it with the naked eye, but the concrete foundations weren't given enough time to cure before they inserted the steel rods to start the superstructure. So with the transit, you could see it was leaning a little bit. Yeah. So Jerry wound up with no money from John Hancock. He winds up spending $20 million out of his own pocket. Now, $20 million back in '66, that's a lot of money today. And it was his personal money. And the thing became a political football in Chicago. And creditors came to the door. They wanted to be paid for the building and other stuff. And Ed Snyder felt that Jerry was dipping into the Eagles' treasury to help keep it going. And so they had a big falling out, and we didn't have the $2 million franchise fee for the Flyers on a Friday when the money was due on Monday, and Ed Snyder had cobbled together $1 million, and he said to me, "You go up to Montreal, and I'll get the money somehow, and we'll wire you the money for the franchise." Mm-hmm. Now, there were 6 new teams coming in, and Baltimore and Vancouver were on standby. They didn't make the cut. So Baltimore was the first alternate if we forfeited, and word was we were going to forfeit. So the day of I fly up to Montreal with Bill Putnam, who was president of the team, and he was a banker. And on Monday, 2 hours before we were due to hand over the $2 million check, we go over to the bank across the street from the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, and we wait there. And finally, Snyder calls and says, "There's been a blackout on the East Coast. We can't wire anything, and there's no electricity here. There's nothing." It was like one of the biggest blackouts in Eastern United States history. So finally, through a private wire through a bank in New York, Morgan Guarantee, they wired the check. We grabbed a $2 million check. Now we're less than an hour away from when we're due to present ours. Baltimore is standing outside the room where you present the checks with their $2 million check, ready to pounce. And we grabbed the check, and it was a hot day in June. We run across the street. There was like this median barrier, a Jersey barrier. I had to climb over the barrier, run across the street, up the steps, down the hall. Now, there's no cell phones, computers, or anything like that in these days. And Bill Putnam looks at it. He goes, "Oh, my God, the check's made out wrong." And I said, "What do you mean it's wrong?" He says, "It's made out to the National Hockey League. It has to be made out to the New York Rangers because each of the 6 new teams were giving $2 million to one of the existing 6 teams, and it went directly to them." So we run to a payphone in the lobby, call Snyder and tell him, and Ed says, "I'm having a heart attack." So he says, "Go back to the bank. I'll see what I can do." Well, there was about 15 minutes to spare when we finally got the right check, and we run across the street again and over the barrier and down the hall and everything, and right past the Baltimore guys who were just about, and I hear, "Philadelphia, you're up." And that was Clarence Campbell, the crusty old commissioner, president, or whatever they called him. He didn't like Snyder. He didn't like Americans. He didn't want American teams in the league, but they had to do it for TV purposes. And I go in, Bill Putnam and I walk in. He's sitting at the table with Bill Jennings, the owner of the Rangers. And they look at us very sternly. And "Do you have the check?" I said, "Yes, sir, sir. Yes, here's the check." And he looks at it and he hands it to Jennings. And they put it down. And they said, "That'll be all." I go, "Did we get the franchise?" He said, "If the check clears," which I doubt.
Right.
So I'm saying, well, I'm thinking of Ed Snyder, and I turned into Jerry Lewis, who you've heard me before. I said, "Well, can I get like maybe a receipt, a piece of paper that says I gave you $2 million?
That's great. That is great.
Yeah. So he said, "That'll be all." Dismissed me. And we went outside, and I said to the Baltimore guys, "I think we effed you. I think you're done." And so we go up to my room, get the telephone. We put through a call to Philadelphia and tell Ed Snyder. And he said, "Well, did we get the franchise? Everything good?" I said, "I think so." He goes, "What do you mean you think so? I wired $2 million twice." He says, "I knew I shouldn't have sent you. I knew." It was so funny. And then he says, "I'm having a heart attack again." I said, "Ed, we don't have a piece of paper. They didn't give us anything, but they said if the check clears." He says, "Well, it's a registered check. It's certified, so it's already cleared. The money's been put away." I said, "Oh, good. All right." So that's how we got the franchise. Now we come home, and Snyder, Wallman, of course, is bankrupt. The building goes into receivership. It's being run by a bank. And I'm trying to sell season tickets and get sponsors. And I'm on the phone calling different corporations in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia had a half decent number of national corporate headquarters in Philly in that days. And I would call, like Campbell Soup. And I say, "This is Lou Scheinfeld from the Flyers." "Flyers? What's Flyers?" I say, "Flyers, the Flyers hockey team." "Briars ice cream?" "No, Flyers." And this was so frustrating. And "What do you mean a hockey team? What? There's no hockey team in Philadelphia. What arena? There's no arena." So it was so frustrating. And Ed and I went to a bank to ask for a loan, a $4 million loan to get the Spectrum finished. And after we finished our 1-hour presentation, the bank president looked at us and said, "Sorry, I can't give you a dime. Soccer will never go over in Philadelphia." And we looked at each other. We said, "It's not soccer, it's hockey." He says, "What's the difference?" I said to him, $4 million is all we need to get the team started and finish the building. He says, "I can make 4,000 car loans for $4 million rather than this for something that's not going to work." I said, "Well, where's your civic pride?" And he says, "I don't have any. I'm a banker." So I learned a lot. I got to tell you, I did learn a lot. We had no TV coverage. We had no radio coverage. We had to pay Channel 48 to do a third period of a game. We had to pay WCAU to do a third period of a game on Sundays only. And then I have to tell you, looking back, I must have been stupid because it didn't deter me. It didn't scare me. I never thought we'd fail. And that was because Ed Snyder, he was a rock, and the guy could outthink and outwork anybody. And I just knew he would make it work.
Yeah. And you have so many good stories in this book, and I would implore everyone to go out and get this book or order it at Barnes & Noble, or I'm not sure if it's on Amazon or not, but Blades, Bands, and Ballers. And we'll bring that at the end of the show, how we can also get in touch with you, Lou. But I want to do two things right now. I want to talk about your number one sporting event, and I know the people of Philadelphia are hungry for a Stanley Cup again, and the last thing they have right now is the 2 Stanley Cups that the Broad Street Bullies brought home. But I also want to talk about the second item is you dealt with a lot of extracurricular activities at the Spectrum as well, whether it be events, music festivals, whatever. I think even Sinatra was there. I can't remember. Can you kind of go into maybe what was your greatest moment there with the Flyers, and what was a significant event at the Spectrum that you experienced from it, whether it be a concert end or a promotion end?
Well, there are several. Got to keep in mind the Spectrum not only had the Flyers, but the Sixers and indoor soccer and indoor lacrosse, circus, ice capades,
Right.
roller derby, truck pulls, every day there was another show there. But the thing that jumps out to me, of course, is winning that first Stanley Cup in 1974. We won it in 75 as well, but that was on the road in Buffalo where we won. But winning that game in Philadelphia, the Broad Street Bullies by then had become a international phenomenon, and almost caused an international incident
Right.
when they brutalized the Russians.
Right. I remember that very well. Yep.
The Russians had come to America and Canada, and they were an all-star team. That was not just a team. That was like the best players in all of Russia put together on the Red Army team. And they had already played 3 games, and they had beat Boston. They beat Chicago, and I think they tied the Rangers or something like that. But they were undefeated coming into Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, the whole hockey world is rooting for Philadelphia to beat the evil Red Machine. And not only did we beat them up physically, and Ed Van Emp took somebody out that was hellacious, legal, of course, hit.
Absolutely.
And the Russians walked off the ice and went into their locker room. It was second period, I think it was. And they wouldn't come out. They said, we're not playing. You make damage on our players. So Ed Snyder went nuts. He was up in the suite with me in the super box, and he goes running down under the stands. And Gene Hart spoke fluent Russian, our announcer, Gene Hart. And Ed grabs Gene Hart and pulls him over to the door of the dressing room, bangs on the door, and the manager of the Russian team comes out. And he says, we no play. And Ed says to Alan Eagleson, the NHL executive who put this whole tour together, have they been paid yet for any of these games? He says, no. He said, good. He says to Gene, tell him you don't play, we don't pay. So Gene
Leverage.
Phrased it more eloquently. And the guy said, okay, we play. Well, they came back out, and of course, I think we won 4-1, and it was just brutal what we did to those people. So that was a highlight. One more highlight was Kate Smith getting her live to the game Game 6 when we beat Boston to win the Stanley Cup, the first Stanley Cup. That was wow. But I have some oddball stories too.
Go, man, go. I want to hear them.
All right. Well, so Frank Sinatra was coming in and for 2 sold-out shows. And Philly and Frank Sinatra, it's like the cheesesteaks and Scrapple. The South Philadelphia turns out en masse for their king,
Right.
Sinatra. So he's coming in for 2 shows in April. I think it was 71 or 72. And they're sold out. Both shows, of course, instantly sold out. And 3 weeks before the show was supposed to open, I get a call from Mickey Rudin. Now, Mickey Rudin was the Los Angeles manager and attorney for Sinatra. And he said, and I didn't know him. He just said who he was. And I go, I knew of him. I said, oh, sure. What can I do for you? He said, well, Frank wants to help out the Teamsters in Philadelphia. And he said, they're going to come in tomorrow with a check for $15,000. He said, their tickets are $15 a piece, your best tickets. He said, sell them 1,000 tickets. He said, they don't have to be first row, start with like the 10th row and, nice, good seats downstairs. He said, and they'll give you a check for 15. They're going to resell them for 30 for their benefit fund.
Yeah.
Quote, and it's all on the up and up. I said, okay, fine, Mickey, that's what you want. Well, I'll do it. So I go into Ed Snutter's office. I start to tell him, he says, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear a word you said. If it goes south, it's you. I have nothing to do with it. I said, Ed, thanks for the backup. I always appreciate the backup. So I call in my assistant controller and I said, his name shall remain
nameless.
Anonymous. And I said, so-and-so, Teamsters are coming in tomorrow with a check for $15,000. Get 1,000 good seats, not first 5 rows, but good seats downstairs. And they'll give you the check, give them the tickets. Okay. He said, fine. I said, I'm leaving for Acapulco at 6 a.m. with a young lady I've been trying to take out of town for a long time.
Right.
I said, so I'll be en route to Acapulco. And he says, fine. So I go to Acapulco with this young lady and we're sitting at the pool. The bar pool on the stools, and she's in her bathing bikini, and I'm in my Jansons. And all of a sudden, I hear I'm paged over the phone, over the loudspeaker at the pool. I go, wait, this can't be good. So I get it. The bartender gets me a phone, and I said, hello, and it's my secretary, Linda, and she's crying. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, there's a man sitting at your desk with a gun. And he won't leave until he gets the tickets he was promised. I said, well, I told so-and-so to get 1,000 good seats. So I said, what's the guy's name? She says, Johnny Flowers. Johnny Flowers.
AKA Knuckles?
And I said, well, put Mr. Flowers on the phone, please. So he gets on. I go, Johnny, and I'd heard of him. I said, I understand there's a problem. He says, no, motherfucker. Oh, sorry. He says,
it's all right, Lou.
He says, you got the problem. I said, what do you mean? He says, the tickets are shit. I said, what are you talking about? The goods down. No. He said, they're up in the nosebleed. He says, I said, I'm not leaving until I get what I was promised. I said, well, look, we'll get the tickets together. Come back tomorrow, please. It'll take He said, MFer, I ain't leaving. I'm sitting at your desk. He says, on my,
God.
I don't know, 38 or whatever he had. He says, it's sitting right on your table. I said, okay, Mr. Flowers. I said, put our accountant guy back on the phone. I'd start screaming at him. What the fuck did you want? He says, I didn't think they needed such good seats. I said, Schmendrick. I won't use his real name. Schmendrick. These guys will kill you. Are you crazy? So he gets the right tickets together, and Johnny Flowers leaves. And 40 years later, I read, and then the concerts went on. It was fun. Oh, I got to finish the story. So I'm still in Acapulco on the pool, and I figure I better call Mickey Rubin to make sure everything's all right. So I get a hold of Mickey Rubin in LA, and it's not easy to make a call in the 60s from Mexico to Los Angeles or Philadelphia. It takes a half an hour. The operator has to make the call and then call you back when she gets the person on the line, So I get Mickey, and I said, listen, I just want to make sure everything's good, right? He goes, it's not effing good. He says, Frank is pissed. We're not playing your building. We're going to Atlantic City Convention Hall instead. Man. He says, we're going to play one show there instead of 2. I said, wait, what do you mean? I already took care of this. He says, not to my liking. So I said, oh, please. I said, Mickey, please, the shows are sold out. The Philly will go nuts. I could get fired. My boss will go crazy. I said, please tell Frank. He says, tell him yourself. He's sitting right here. Next thing I know, I hear somebody go, what's up, kid? I go, Mr. Sinatra? He goes, we're just effing with you. He says, everything's cool. He says, just buy me some Jack when I come to Philly.
Oh, man.
So now I'm sitting there dumbfounded. And we had just gotten to Acapulco and gotten our bathing suits and went to the pool. And I hear this little voice, and she says, Lily, what's happening? And I looked down, and there's this blonde I brought to Acapulco. I forgot all about her. And I said to her in my Humphrey Bogart, I said, Doll, you don't want to know. And that's my
great.
Sinatra story.
You got some good imitations going on with the Jerry Lewis, and I mean, you're quite talented, Mr. Scheinfeld. Before we get off the air, though, I want to kind of recognize you for everything that you've accomplished and how you really helped the city of Philadelphia in so many different ways. The amazing stories that you tell, which I think are fabulous, and we'll finish up with your book. But did you have, through your career, and you've had an array of experiences in life, what would you say, other than maybe your family, what would be your one takeaway from everything that you've experienced in your own life?
Well, we saved the Flyers from going to Baltimore.
Yeah.
We opened an arena where nobody wanted to come. I had friends who came and said to me that I invited do we have to bring blankets? I said, no, it's an indoor building. They knew nothing about hockey. And we sold hockey. We sold hockey in a non-hockey town because we put on, it was the worst thing to watch on television. First of all, the black and white and this little puck you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And I felt that anybody who came to a game had to leave dazzled. So we had a super advanced scoreboard built instead of the old hockey basketball scoreboard that you would see in a high school gym. Yeah. We had this electronic scoreboard. We had first class food. We had usherettes dressed in hot pants and boots, white boots, and we had parking was only $1. And I worked with Aramark. They were called Aramark.
Right, I remember.
Aramark, yeah. I worked with them to keep the prices low and to have good food. And I would be at the door greeting people. And Myrna Snyder, Ed's wife, was so involved in making everybody in the building feel welcome, the workers, whether you were a janitor or a senior vice president. And it became a family. We were working in a pile of bricks in South Philly. I worked myself up. I worked my way up to a basement in South Philly, as president of the Spectrum. And we would go in and be dark in the morning. We'd leave it be dark at night. And the building, I went to Frank Rizzo, who was mayor at the time, and I said, Frank, we need the events that are at Convention Hall, the ice show, the boxing, the wrestling, the roller derby. And he said, well, why would I give them to you instead of having them at convention? I said, because you're not in the business of subsidizing entertainment. We're on the hook for millions with the Spectrum. And he thought it over and he said, you're right. He said, but you let us have political conventions, union meetings, stuff like that. You can have all the entertainment. And that made the Spectrum. So Frank Rizzo was a very polarizing figure. And he's, a lot of people hate the man, but he did a wonderful thing for the Spectrum because he believed in it. And I don't know how much time we have, but I have a great Rizzo Snyder story.
Give us a quick one, because I want to talk about real fast the status of your museum project that you've been working on, and then where people can find you. So quick story, and then
the Rolling Stones come in. I think that was 71 or 72, and they had just come from on a tour where there were riots in every city because people were trying to get in who didn't have tickets. There were counterfeit tickets. Mick Jagger and one of his cohorts got arrested a couple of times for fighting and hitting photographers. So they're coming to Philadelphia, and I'm nervous because we got these big plate glass windows all around the Spectrum, and they were $2,500 a piece then. So we remove all the gravel and everything from the garden in front, and we flood the parking lot with undercover cops and everything. And we asked the city for extra police. So they send down like 2 busloads of police. Well, everything goes well. And a week later, we got a bill from the city of Philadelphia for $63,000 for police overtime. We had never gotten a bill for a dime from police in the past. So I called Frank and I said, listen, could Ed Snyder and I come in and see you? He said, sure, absolutely. So we go in and we go into his office. Now, he's in the white starched shirt and he's like looming over the desk. And he said, what brings you gentlemen here? I said, well, we have this bill. And I handed it to him and he looks at it and he goes, tears it in half, and quarters again, drops it in the trash can. He goes, this goes away. He said, I just wanted to see Ed Snyder's ass in my office. We get outside and Ed Snyder said to me, I am scared S-less of that guy. He said, I'll fight anybody, but that guy scares the you know what out of me. He said, where's the closest bar?
Well, I know you tell a lot of these stories in your book, but real fast, go into your museum project that you've been working on, and then we'll finish out the show with your book.
All right. Well, the museum project is, I don't want to say it's on the back burner, but we got waylaid by the pandemic, and people are not contributing for a sports building. They seem to feel that the philanthropic people feel the teams should do it, and the teams are not interested in supporting the museum in any substantive way. Sixers have been wonderful, I'll say that. So that's kind of on the back burner right now. I'm still looking for the right place. And the right person. We need an angel, to come up with $8 or $10 million, and we've got all the goods. Dr. Tapachi, my colleague, has $35 million worth of memorabilia, rare stuff. But we are opening a small demonstration museum in Washington Township, New Jersey, right after the first of the year. It's going to contain about 30% of Dr. Tapachi's collection. So you'll be able to go there and see Babe Ruth's uniform and Jackie Robinson's and Ty Cobb, Joe Lewis's championship belt, Al Lee's robe, and everything that is in this collection is one of a kind, game worn and or signed. So Dr. Tapachi does not sell things. He's a hoarder. So everything he has is fantastic stuff. So we're going to open that, and we're hoping to use that as a springboard to bring potential contributors to see what we have on a smaller basis and finally get it open in Philadelphia. So there's a couple possibilities in Philadelphia. It's the Navy Yard, Penn's Landing. There's big developments going on at those two places, and we've been in touch with developers there. So it's not an easy fight to raise $8 or $10 million.
And Lou, where can people get a hold of your book, and where can they contact you?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, through the internet to order it. It's $29.95. But if anybody, and a lot of people have done this, if anybody wants a personal autographed book, go to my website, themuseumofsports.org, and make a $35 donation. You'll not only get a book, you'll get it delivered to you overnight, and it will be personalized in your name. And there's no sales tax, and shipping's included. So it's a better deal than going through Amazon. So themuseumofsports.org, donate $35, and you'll have it in a day or two.
Wow. And you'll get all the great stories that you went into today. So I recommend everyone to get that book as soon as possible, not to mention the legendary Lou Scheinfeld signature on that book and all the perks that go along with it. So, Lou, thank you for being on our show and being one of our heart of a champion type of people. We greatly appreciate you being on, and you've been a big inspiration to not only me, but the city of Philadelphia.
Well, thank you, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be with you. I love talking to you and to your people.
And that'll do it for today. I would like to thank my guest, Lou Scheinfeld, former vice president of the Philadelphia Flyers, for coming on the show. For my producer, Joe Lee, next to me, you've heard his voice come on the air once today. My executive producers, Jim Sims, CJ DeRoma. I'm Chuck Bushbeck. Thank you all for watching Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page and consider supporting us on Patreon at the link in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time on Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion.